Welcome to Taste of Ace. My name is Chef Amy, and I'd like to welcome you to my home kitchen. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to journey to the countryside of France, and we're going to do something known as a galette, which is fancy French words for an open-faced rustic tart. This isn't about perfection. This isn't about dough braiding. This is about a celebration of the fruit and a celebration of just simply being together. So I've chosen blueberries because it is the height of blueberry season. If you're looking for something to do with a family, a great option would be to go blueberry picking somewhere wonderful like Underwood Farms right down there in Somas or Moore Park. So I've selected blueberries for us today rather than peaches just because they're a little bit easier to work with. But peaches would also be a great choice. To begin the process, what we need to be able to do is make our crust. Now you could make this very, very simple on yourself and just buy a pre-made pastry or pie shell. You can do it Pillsbury, Trader Joe's has some great ones, etc. I would not recommend buying one of the frozen ones because we want to be able to work with the dough. So first check, if you want to buy a pie crust, great, go for it. They're delicious. But I would like to teach you how to make your own pie crust today. The recipe that I provided for you is for just one pie shell, but if you'd like a double crust pie, just simply double the recipe. What I have over here in my Cuisinart is very simple. I have a cup and a half of flour, I have a half a teaspoon of salt, and I have a half of a tablespoon of sugar. The sugar is a little variation from my granny's recipe. She never put sugar in her pie crust, but a very dear friend of mine who's a pastry chef taught me long ago that if you add just a little bit of sugar to that pie dough, it helps the caramelization or the browning of the crust. Pretty tricky. So all I've done is I've added that to my Cuisinart, and now what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to pulse it. I apologize for the noise. You might want to put it on mute for a second. All I'm doing there is pulsing or aerating, which means I'm evenly distributing that salt and that sugar and flour together so that when I add my other ingredients, I get an even mix. And the aeration gives it a little bit of lightness. Now comes the fun part, the butter. Wouldn't be French if we weren't adding butter. I'm going to do a half a cup of butter or one stick. All I've done is I've started the cut by going lengthwise once. I'm going to rotate it, go right down the middle again, and now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and get it into some nice chunks. You can use salted or unsalted. It really is your preference. I know a lot of folks who say, you know what, I really would rather use unsalted butter because unsalted butter, then I can control my salt. Well, I learned a lot of my cooking from my gran, and Granny never ever used unsalted butter. That I can guarantee you. I don't think she probably even knew that existed. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go through and slide that top off our Cuisinart, and I'm going to take those beautiful chunks of butter, and I'm just going to sprinkle them around. That's our oven coming up to 400 degrees because we're going to need it to be 400 degrees to be able to make our tart. So in it goes. Put that lid back down. And I'm going to mess with your sound systems again and do a little bit of pulsing on this because what I'm looking for is a fine, like wet sand kind of a look. So hang in, just pulse. Couple of them. And you can see this, I'm not sure if you can or not. What I actually have still are large hunks of butter. That's not what I'm looking for. I want some, I don't want a lot. Snap it back. Give it a couple more pulses. And those big hunks of butter have disappeared, and I now have sort of a wet sand look. Our next ingredient couldn't get any easier. We're talking about ice water. I actually have some here. This is certainly not how much we're going to need. This is just a demonstration of how to be able to get that water ice cold. Please don't just do it from the tap. I want that ice cold water to match the temperature of my butter. When I was a kid, and we would be visiting my grandparents in the summertime, it was always exciting to see this on Granny's counter. I knew there was pie for dessert, and her pies were not to be missed. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to get that lid back on. I'm going to use a tablespoon, and what I need is approximately 3 tablespoons of butter for this. I'm sorry, 3 tablespoons of water. I'm not going to go with all 3. I'm going to start with 2, and I want you to listen a little bit because the sound is going to change as our dough gets closer to ready. So forgive me, on it goes. Just measure off the tablespoon, and it goes. There's 1, no change in our sound. There's 2. Now you'll notice you can hear just a little bit of a change in the sound. I'm going to go for that 3rd one. change has happened and I've got a much crumblier looking dough, something put together. I'm going to slide this off my base, and in we go. This looks kind of crumbly and something that you may not be real sure of, but trust me, it's going to be just fine. So now that we've got that out, make sure to get that blade out and be very cautious of your fingers. Those things will cut you like nobody's business. I saw a dear friend of mine teaching a class, trying to help me out doing dishes, and there was a blade, and sure enough, she almost lopped off the top of that thumb. So please be very careful with it. So see, just like this, we have pie crust. This is not hard. If you were to do 2 pie crusts, or the double that recipe for a pie crust, then what I would suggest is divide the dough into 2 pieces, so you've got a top and a bottom. And what we're going to do is we're simply going to take that dough, use a little bit of our elbow grease, and what we're going to do is we're going to shape it into a disc. That disc is going to help us when it comes time to roll out our dough, because if this started out as a square and I wanted a circle, that might challenge me just a little bit more than I want to be challenged if I'm making a pie someday. So I'm going to wrap this in plastic wrap, and in the refrigerator it's going to go. 2.5 hours minimum is what I like to do, preferably overnight. It allows that butter to come back to a nice cold temperature, because if it does, it's going to melt nice and slowly inside my oven, and it's going to leave a hole or a flake in the dough and create a nice pastry puff. If you don't have 2.5 hours to wait, then simply take this and place it in the freezer for about 20 to 30 minutes, and it'll get to the texture that you're looking for. So now our crust is done. Now we're ready to mix our filling. Again, the crust is something, had you decided to do a pre-made one, you're already halfway there, and all you'd have to do is what we're about to do. Look at these beautiful berries. These beautiful berries represent about 1 pound of blueberries. You only need 1 pound, which is about 3 cups approximately, of blueberries. I'm not always really particular about making sure all the stems are gone. I mean, I don't want a long stem like this, but a little tiny one picking up, not a problem at all. So now that we have our 3 cups of blueberries, we're going to add some of the rest of our ingredients. I have sugar, just plain white refined sugar, about a 1/2 cup. I'm going to go ahead and get that in there. There's a little moisture in the air today, so things are sticking a little differently. I've got 1/4 teaspoon ground cinnamon. I have 1/4 teaspoon just plain old table salt. And I have 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. The reason for the cornstarch is as this mixes together and those berries start to pop and create a juice, I need something to thicken that up so it doesn't just run through my dough or run out and over the sides of the dough. In it goes. The next thing that we need to do is we need the zest of 1 lemon. This is just your average size lemon. We talked about this a little bit last time we were together, and you've seen me use a zesting tool before, known as a microplane. It's this lovely piece right here, which can be used in so many different ways, like grating cheese and grating an egg for a different texture on an egg salad. But its primary use is to zest citrus. The right way taught in culinary school is you would actually put tip down on your cutting board and go this way. I'm not always as graceful as I'd like to be, and I will confess that sometimes when I do that I end up scraping my thumb. You don't need thumb into your beautiful zest. So what I like to do is actually take the lemon in the palm of my hand, invert this with the blade side down, and simply drag over it. A lemon this size is going to give you about 1 tablespoon of lemon zest. And that's all we need to be able to really make this delicious. Just a tip, because we are going to need a tablespoon of lemon juice as well. This is a little handy tip. I've seen a lot of home cooks do this, and even some of my newer students in my jail program, or my cooking programs rather. What they do is they see juice and zest. They juice first, which makes it almost impossible to do anything in terms of juicing the lemon. So what I can do is now just take this, whack it over my bowl, and just like that, my 1 tablespoon of lemon zest is where I need it to be. I'm going to go ahead and bring this cutting board back and commit a sin of the kitchen, which is there's actually something already else on this. Why would I contaminate it? But I'm going to use that pie crust for us in just a little bit, so I'm not too upset about that. So here we have our beautiful lemon itself. Tip, when you're getting ready to juice a lemon, let it come to room temperature first, because if it's cold, it's like a rock, and it's almost impossible for you to get to the right answer. So all we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and zest this, or juice this little guy right over our cup. Doesn't take much. It's about a half a lemon will give you what you're looking for. If your lemon isn't juicing as quickly as you'd like it to, simply take that half, put a fork into this end, and turn and twist this way. So turn one way, twist the other, and right over your bowl, and that'll get you to the right answer. Now, I deliberately waited to put our lemon juice in last, because if you put it at the base, it's not going to penetrate through all of these dry ingredients, which I need it to do, because I needed to start breaking everything down. So in this, I do happen to have my 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, but just to make sure we're in good shape, I'll measure it out, and sure enough, good to go. I've got a little bit left, but I wanted to show off for you a little bit. And now all we're going to do is simply mix this all together. I try not to use a big steel spoon when I do this. I like to use a spatula because I don't want my berries to start breaking down just yet. I want them to pop while they're in the oven. So I'm stirring away. Now you'll notice this looks a little scary perhaps because it isn't all juicy like you think of a pie. And that's okay. I don't need it to be juicy at this point. What I need is to get those berries coated with absolutely all that yumminess. If it's not all coming together the way I want it to, so I've still got a lot more dry than I really want, is you have 2 choices here. You could add a little bit more lemon juice, or you could add just a splash of water. Don't overdo either, because you don't want this so messy and so juicy that it won't be contained in your pie shell. I'm going to use maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon more of the lemon juice. And this is just experience talking. This isn't like a cardinal rule somewhere. It's what I'm experienced enough to look at and know that's not quite right. You're the same at home. I used to laugh with my gran when I was a kid. She would say, "Oh, the chicken's done." And you would say, "Well, Granny, how do you know the chicken's done?" as we're standing there. And she'd say, "Listen to it. The grease isn't popping as much as it once was." Same with a pie. When she put a pie in the oven, she would often talk to it. My mom used to do the same thing and talk to it just a little bit and say, "Don't run over." So now we can set this aside because this portion of our task is done. We're going to let that all sit together so it can come together for us here in just a minute. I'm also going to get this out of the way, and now I'm going to teach you another old school trick. This is simply a clean kitchen towel, tea towel if you will, and there's a reason I'm going to place it right here on my countertop. I have a pie crust to roll out. I don't want all that mess over my countertop. I don't want to bring out another cutting board, and also when I do some of that, things tend to slide. This towel will keep anything from sliding and give me a work surface that I can layer onto. So this would work underneath a cutting board as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take parchment paper, not wax paper, parchment paper. I'm going to place it over that clean towel, spread it out a little bit, looking good. So now I've got a pie crust that I started earlier today. This has been in the fridge probably about 4 hours, but it's ready to go. So I'm just going to get that unpeeled here or unwrapped. You notice it's not a real elaborate way to do this. It's just a very simple, straightforward way to go. Now the other thing that I had done was I took a little bit of extra flour out this morning. So this is just regular AP flour. I'm going to keep it here by my workstation in case this starts to stick to my rolling pin. I've got something to break that loose. This is just your old school French rolling pin. I actually prefer these rather than ones that have the dowel through the center and you have handles in your roll. It's just easier to control these. Classic French style, it tapers down at the ends. It just feels good in your palm of your hand and is actually really tailored to do that. So this is going to be kind of cold and a little bit hard to work with when you first get started. Don't let it panic you because it's all going to be good. One of the tricks to keeping it in a circle is rotating it. Because as you rotate it, you're going to keep that original shape and you don't end up with an oblong. So again, this is a rustic tart. Rustic tart means just that. It's rustic and beautiful. It isn't about perfection. It's about putting something together on a warm summer's day that's going to celebrate the season, celebrate being together, and keep it easy. Because the whole idea is you want to get back outside and do whatever it was you were doing and enjoying outside. So as we keep going, the dough gets a little bit softer as we go. I'm going to be quiet for just a second. You can speed it up so folks can see what I'm doing. That way they're not too bored. We're ready to go. So here we go. Hopefully you enjoyed that fast forward of me working hard to get this out. If you'll notice, I'll try and hold it up for you. It's not a perfect round. I'm not looking for perfectly round. What I'm looking for is rustic. To make sure that I've gotten about the equivalent of what a 9-inch pie shell would be, I do have the simple measuring trick if I'm really feeling insecure about taking a simple pie plate and inverting it. And sure enough, it's a little bit larger than my pie shell, which is exactly what I would want it to be. And we are now ready for the fun stuff. I'm going to take this big sheet pan, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to slide that parchment up onto the sheet pan, and now I'm ready for my next step. Couldn't get any easier, helps us with cleanup later. Our berries are now going to be used to actually fill our pie shell. We're just going to spoon them right into the center. So, in they go. Now, if you want, you could do something a little bit different, and instead of doing one large galette, you could do like a couple of smaller circles and make individual galettes. My neighbor does this often with her grandchildren, her grandgirls, and she sent me a picture not too long ago. It was really cute. It was she and it was all the individual little galettes that she and the grandkids had done. Pretty cute. All right, so here comes our technical expertise, and truly this is not the hard part. All we're going to want to do, now that everything's mounted in the center, is we're going to take this beautiful pastry, we're going to pull it up so that it extends about 1 inch to 1.5 inches into the actual berries. And we pleat as we go, or tuck as we go. You're going to notice on the one that I put together here just a little bit ago, I did something a little differently, and there were 2 reasons for that, and I'll explain as we get there. Again, this is rustic. This isn't about perfection. This isn't about pleasing absolutely everybody in the household with your ability to be decorative with pie crust. This is about getting it all to the center, folding things up, and making it yummy. So there we go. It's all in the center, and it is now ready for our next step. Our next step is more butter, because after all, we're in France right now. All I've done is I've taken 1 tablespoon of butter, and similar to what I did for the pie crust, I've cubed it. And I'm actually just going to take that and put it right on the inside where that gorgeous filling is. Just dot it, a little bit here, a little bit there. And what's the purpose of that is really pretty straightforward. The purpose of that butter inside our pie filling is it's going to melt through, it's going to activate that cornstarch, help break down those sugars, and add another level of yum to this. So now that we've gotten this taken care of, comes in one last 2 little pieces. All we've got here is an egg. As you can tell by the beautiful orange, the beautiful orange of our egg, this is a farm-raised country type of egg. Isn't this the cutest little whisk you ever saw? I bought them in a pack of 3 somewhere, and I just love them. Just a quick tip, whenever you want to break down an egg, whether you're going to beat an egg white for a meringue or you want to do an egg itself and you want to make sure that you can really get it spreadable and not gloppy, what you need to do is let it come to room temperature. Room temperature will make it easy to do. So now what we're going to do is take our trusty pastry brush, dip it in, and paint right around the edges. I spilled a little bit here on my sheet pan. I don't care. It's on the parchment paper, not on the actual tart itself, and that's just fine. It's going to not be a problem for me even with cleanup, because that parchment paper is sure going to make this easy for me to clean up later. So here we go. All painted and beautiful. And our last step, the piece de resistance, is turbinado sugar, often referred to as sanding sugar. If you'll notice inside, it looks almost like a brown sugar, but what it is a largely granulated sugar. And I'm just going to sprinkle it right here on those egg painted sides, because this is going to not only add a nice little extra hint of sweetness, the other thing it's going to do is add a little bit of texture, and it's also going to add just a little bit of flavor. Now, if you were to use white sugar, it's not going to work. You're not going to see the sanding. It just sort of sits there and acts like sandpaper in your mouth when you actually go for the final feel. So that you have a visual on it. I am not recommending this product as much as I'm demonstrating that this is what it looks like, turbinado sugar. This one is actually an organic brand. I should have mentioned as I started out, even my berries are organic. I'm kind of fussy that way. Everything that comes into my home kitchen is about organic and grass-fed and all that stuff. But even my sugar, my things that are not as healthy for me, are also organic just because. So now what I'm going to do is I'm done. I am done. I simply need to now put this into a 400-degree preheated oven, which I got behind me. And when I return, I'm going to show you the beautiful tart that I made earlier today. So in it goes, and thanks to the magic of technology, I'm able to bring forward for you the beautiful tart that I made earlier today. This is gorgeous, isn't it? I can hardly wait. My husband's after it all day. Knew when it was there. I had to give him instructions for hands off for a little bit, but I know he's excited. So you notice I didn't do that full inch and a half around the edges here, and I did that on purpose for two reasons, as I indicated earlier. One is my husband doesn't like crust as much as everybody else does, so I always try and gear however I'm cooking to whoever I'm feeding, and I'm sure you do the same. The other is I wanted to actually demonstrate to you what a different look this is than when you do it yourself and do that inch and a half border around it when you do it at home. I promised you one other tip before we conclude today, and that is something to serve this with. You could certainly do whipped cream, but here's what I'm going to suggest. Take whatever vanilla ice cream you really enjoy and bring a couple of cups to room temperature. It's soft enough that you can actually stir it. And to that, add a tablespoon of lemon zest. And just pop that bad boy back in the freezer and let it set until time for service. Serve this just a little warm with a scoop of that homemade lemon ice cream that you just made, because it is homemade. You put it together all right there in your kitchen, and trust me, you're going to have quite the fan club. So thanks for joining me today. You can find our recipe in the description section underneath the video here. And I'd also love to hear from you. We've established an email box so you can send questions or recipe ideas or things you'd like to learn. So please give us a note at atasteofvase@adultedventura.edu. It's been a pleasure spending time with you again today. I look forward to next time. Please stay well and safe, and remember to play with your food. I certainly have fun that way.